Who lives in a pineapple under the sea? SpongeBob SquarePants. Absorbent and yellow and forest is he. SpongeBob SquarePants. If nautical nonsense is something you wish, SpongeBob SquarePants. They drop on the deck and flop like a fish. SpongeBob SquarePants. 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 Bum, 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 bum. But, real talk for a second, yes, I am reviewing the SpongeBob SquarePants movie from 2004. Finally, I'm tackling one of the higher grossing Nickelodeon movies. And finally, we're tackling the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. So, after the box office bombshell that was Rugrats Go Wild, Nickelodeon decided to gamble with SpongeBob. And yes, given the fact that SpongeBob was a massive hit on TV, this was a massive gamble that paid off as Steven Hillenburg was at the front and center helm of making a SpongeBob SquarePants movie. Now, Hillenburg wanted this to practically be the ending of SpongeBob SquarePants. He intended to have the movie be the quote-unquote ending of SpongeBob, but because of the movie's success, Nick renewed the show for a fourth season and beyond. I mean, sure, Hillenburg eventually did come back to the show after leaving for a long time. I mean, he came during the middle of season 9. He came back during the middle of the 9th and 10th season of the show. Sure, the show is not as funny as it once was, but, you know, it's still Shakespeare compared to what we have nowadays. And that's saying a lot. So, this is my review of the 2004 SpongeBob SquarePants movie. So, we begin with a live action segment with, you guessed it, pirates, who spot a dinghy off the port bow. And one of these pirates, who was rowing the dinghy, had a treasure chest. They managed to get the dinghy on board the ship, and, of course, the pirate who was rowing the dinghy. Inside the treasure chest was tickets to the SpongeBob movie. And then we get a sea shanty version of the SpongeBob SquarePants theme song being sung by these pirates, as they are excited that they got tickets to the SpongeBob movie. And then we see them sail up to a movie theater in their big pirate ship, and of course we see them trash the concession stand, and of course them make their way to the front seats of the theater to watch the movie. Now, the actual movie begins with a dream sequence of police and helicopters surrounding the Krusty Krab, as what started out with a simple order was a Krabby Patty with cheese. Then, SpongeBob pulls up in a boat that's black with flames on it, and he's wearing cowboy boots and he's holding a briefcase with black gloves. After Mr. Krabs told him the situation, SpongeBob goes into the restaurant in order to calm the situation down by putting cheese on the Krabby Patty. After he said, "I want you to do me a favor, Phil. Say cheese," after hearing about Phil's family. And now we cut back to... And then we realized this was a dream, after all, like I said, as SpongeBob wakes up and he's excited, as today is the grand opening ceremony for the new Krusty Krab 2, where Mr. Krabs is going to announce the manager position for the new Krusty Krab 2. And SpongeBob has assured himself that he is going to become the manager. After all, he's been Employee of the Month so many goddamn years. Yes, it is funny that SpongeBob has won Employee of the Month so many times. Mainly because he works hard. So now, we get into a montage of SpongeBob getting ready for the day. And then, of course, he interrupts Squidward during his shower. And Squidward's like, "Can't this wait until work?" And SpongeBob's like, "There's no shower at work." And then Squidward kicks SpongeBob out of his house. And then SpongeBob runs over to his best friend Patrick, as Patrick thinks SpongeBob's gonna get the promotion as well. And they get into a little bit of early celebration as they begin singing the Goofy Goober theme song and wearing these peanut hats. After SpongeBob said, "We're gonna go where all the action is to celebrate my new promotion." So, meanwhile, at the unveiling of the Krusty Krab 2, Mr. Krabs is being interviewed by newscaster Perch Perkins, voiced by D. Bradley Baker. And yes, I am aware D. Bradley Baker not only voices Perch Perkins, but he also voices a few other characters in this movie. So yeah, he voices 3 other characters in this movie. Anyway, he asked Mr. Krabs, "What motivated you to open another Krusty Krab right next door to the original?" And Mr. Krabs says, "Money." And out looking in the distance through a telescope was Mr. Krabs' arch nemesis, Plankton. Upset that Mr. Krabs has all this success, and he hasn't had one single customer. Plankton, in the beginning of this scene, feels defeated that all of his plans to steal the Krabby Patty formula have failed, as he has filed his plans A to Y, until his computer wife, Karen, tells him, "What about Z?" And then Plankton's like, "Z?" And then Karen's like, "Z, the letter that comes after Y." And then Plankton sees his evil plan Z that he never used, and then finally realizes that this Plan Z can't possibly fail. So he then makes a promise saying, "So enjoy your victory today, Mr. Krabs. By tomorrow, I'll have the Krabby Patty formula, and everybody will eat at the Chum Bucket, and I will rule the world." And then Plankton is stepped on by SpongeBob. And SpongeBob doesn't even seem to notice that he stepped on Plankton. Then Plankton said, "Not in something, on someone, you twit." And then SpongeBob peels Plankton off of his shoe. And then SpongeBob says, "Well, see ya," after saying good luck with your plans. And then Plankton's like, "Stupid kid." And then we go to the grand opening ceremony. So before Mr. Krabs does the ribbon cutting for the new Krusty Krab 2, he begins to announce his manager, giving hints that to get SpongeBob's hopes up, instead of saying SpongeBob, he gives it to Squidward. And then SpongeBob begins cheering, thinking that he got the job, even though Mr. Krabs clearly said Squidward. And then Mr. Krabs breaks it to SpongeBob that he's not mature to handle being a manager, since, of course, he chose Squidward because he's more mature. Even though, in fact, Squidward is kind of a lazy bum, but who cares? So, SpongeBob begins walking off into the distance, upset, after realizing that he didn't get the job, as he begins saying, "I'm ready, depression." And then Patrick comes down flying down naked. That's right, Patrick is butt naked, parachuting down from his trunks and holding a flag in his ass. Yes, that's right. Patrick is holding a flag in his butt cheeks. And he's saying, "Hooray for SpongeBob!" And then crashes into the curtain with Squidward's face on it. And then Patrick's like, "Where'd everybody go? Did you see my butt?" Then it flash forwards to the castle of King Neptune, where Plankton sneaks into the castle, and we meet King Neptune, voiced by Jeffrey Tambor, and his daughter Mindy, voiced by Scarlett Johansson. Yes, that's right. Voiced by the Black Widow herself, Scarlett Johansson. Yes, Scarlett is actually in the SpongeBob movie long before she was in the MCU. Go figure. And this is like her most notable one of her more notable animated roles. Like, yeah, she would have appearances in the Sing movies years later, but I can't remember another animated role she did besides Mindy and the character she did in the Sing movies. And Mindy is the complete opposite of her father. She's a lot more kinder than her father, where her father's kind of a strict, rules with an iron fist type character. And wanted to send he wanted to send his royal crown polisher into the dungeon for 20 years. But Mindy said, "No, you're free to go," and she frees the crown polisher. And then King Neptune's like, "Mindy, how dare you defy me?" And Mindy says, "I wish you would show a little bit more compassion." And then the King Neptune begins lecturing Mindy about the crown and his kingly authority, and then someday you will wear this crown. And then Mindy's like, "I'm gonna be bald," and then Neptune's like, "Thinning! It's a receding hairline." Then, of course, King Neptune puts a pillow on his head, realizing that his crown was gone after Mindy pointed it out to him. And then we cut back to Plankton, wearing wearing a helipack, and flying out of the castle with the crown, leaving behind a note, framing Eugene Krabs for the crime. Meanwhile, we cut back to the Goofy Goober party boat, where SpongeBob is crying in the nut bar. Then SpongeBob pulls it together for a brief second until Patrick kind of reminds him of it. And then he tells Patrick, "I didn't get the promotion. Mr. Krabs thinks I'm a kid." And then Patrick's like, "Well, saying you're a kid is like saying I'm a kid." And then Patrick begins having his goober meal and then orders a triple berry goober sunrise. And then before SpongeBob could leave, he sees that Patrick had a triple goober berry sunrise. And then SpongeBob says, "You know what? I could use one of those." And then SpongeBob gets his, and then they begin eating ice cream and getting drunk on ice cream. So this is funny to watch SpongeBob and Patrick just get drunk off of ice cream. This entire scene was probably one of the funniest bits of the movie. I mean, yes, this movie is a very charming and very funny movie. I mean, after all, this movie is shown to be a celebration of the golden era of SpongeBob, as this was what ended the golden era of SpongeBob, and what a way to go out. So the next morning, SpongeBob wakes up, and one of the employees is like, "Hey buddy, I want to go home. It's 8 in the morning. Go collect your friend and get out of here." And then SpongeBob's like, "Oh my gosh, it's 8 o'clock. I'm late for work. Mr. Krabs is gonna kill me." And then SpongeBob gets angry after mentioning Mr. Krabs. Then, back onto the Krusty Krab, we see Squidward in Mr. Krabs' office, as Mr. Krabs is looking at a telescope, talking about finding easy money. And then King Neptune shows up to the Krusty Krab too, at which Mr. Krabs says, I'm Eugene Krabs, Your Highness. Would you like a Krabby Patty? And then, and then King Neptune's like, I'm on to you, Krabs. And then shows Mr. Krabs the note that that Plankton left that was supposed to frame him for the crime. And then, of course, Krabs is like, I'm innocent, I didn't take it. And then Mr. Krabs' voicemail goes off. And then Plankton overhears Neptune screaming over the phone. Then, before he could fry Mr. Krabs, or before he could quote-unquote splatter crabs all over the wall, SpongeBob comes in, and then he begins accusing Mr. Krabs of being a horrible person. Then, Neptune zaps Mr. Krabs, setting Mr. Krabs on fire until Mr. Krabs puts himself out. Then, before he could try to shoot another beam from his trident, SpongeBob gets in front of King Neptune and tries to calm him down. And then Neptune's like, Mr. Krabs stole my crown, that's why he must die. And then SpongeBob's like, well, can't I go and get your crown back? And then, of course, mocking SpongeBob, the king mocks SpongeBob after saying, no one's ever gone to Shell City and survived the journey. Plus, you're just a kid. And then SpongeBob's like, I'm not a kid, I can do it. And then of course, Mindy convinces her father to let SpongeBob go on the quest. And then the king agrees to it, granting SpongeBob a 6-day reprieve. Now, originally, Neptune was going to grant him a quote-unquote, a 10-day reprieve, but because Patrick and him got into an argument of the number of days, Neptune's like, 6 it is, and then freezes Mr. Krabs in place. So yes, SpongeBob and Patrick are off to Shell City to retrieve Neptune's crown from Shell City in order to rescue Mr. Krabs, or else Mr. Krabs will die. So, SpongeBob and Patrick get into the paddy wagon and drive off, while Squidward just walked out the door instead of just helping SpongeBob and Patrick from the very beginning. Oh yeah, Squidward is pretty much useless in this movie. He pretty much does nothing. I mean, sure, he was the one who figured out that Plankton stole the crown, but that was about it with Squidward. So, SpongeBob and Patrick are off. Meanwhile, we cut back to Plankton as the restaurant is abandoned and the frozen Mr. Krabs is in place, and nobody stops Plankton as he walks right out the front door taking the Krabby Patty formula. So, finally, after all these years of failing to capture the Krabby Patty formula, Plankton finally has his stubby little fingers on the Krabby Patty formula. So, Plankton's like, Plan Z, I love ya! So, we cut back to SpongeBob and Patrick as they approach the county line, where they meet two hillbillies. One voiced by D. Bradley Baker, and the other one voiced by Mr. Lawrence. That's right, the same guy who voices Plankton also voiced one of the hillbillies. And then the hillbillies tell SpongeBob and Patrick they won't last long outside the city by laughing at them. And then SpongeBob and Patrick get their car jacked, or get the paddy wagon jacked from them by this guy in a mask. And then SpongeBob and Patrick said, how many minutes was that? Or how many seconds was that? And then he said, 12. And then SpongeBob and Patrick said, in your face! And then they begin walking off, heading towards the outskirts of town, continuing their journey through the outskirts of town. Meanwhile, we flash back to Plankton selling Krabby Patties at the Chum Bucket, and with every purchase, he gives away free bucket helmets. And then Plankton said, "Nothing can stop me now." And then Karen informs Plankton that nothing except SpongeBob and his pink friend. They're on their way to Shell City, and if they get back here with the crown, Neptune will discover some fingerprints. Tiny fingerprints. Stubby, tiny fingerprints, as Karen is telling Plankton. But then Plankton says, "I'm way ahead of you, baby. I've already hired someone to take care of those two. He's a vicious, cold-blooded predator." And we flash forward to an assassin riding a motorcycle by the name of Dennis. And Dennis is voiced by Alec Baldwin. Yes, that's right. Alec Baldwin is in a SpongeBob movie. Yes, that's right. Alec freaking Baldwin is in a SpongeBob movie. Dennis pulls up and he finds a sesame seed from the paddy wagon. And then the hillbillies said, "Hey, mister, does that hat take 10 gallons? And then Dennis rips their lips off and then drives right off. So we then cut back to SpongeBob and Patrick as they come across the paddy wagon parked outside of a bar called the Thug Tug, which is an enormous tugboat. And they discovered that the guy that took the key to that the guy who took the paddy wagon is inside the bar with the key that he has wrapped around his belt loop. So SpongeBob and Patrick decide to go in and do a distraction and get the key, but Patrick says, "I want to do the distraction." But Patrick's distraction doesn't work, and SpongeBob, before he can grab the key, he decides to head into the bathroom and then yells at Patrick, saying, "You call that a distraction?" And Patrick said, "But I had to use the bathroom." And then SpongeBob's like, "Well, I got my hands dirty for nothing." And then SpongeBob pumps the soap out of the soap dispenser, and then they begin having a quote-unquote bubble party in the bathroom, which one of the bubbles goes into the bar, and then the bar manager, who is voiced by Thomas F. Wilson. Yes, that's right. Biff from the Back to the Future movies, is also in this movie, as he voices the manager in the bar. He pops the bubble and says, "Somebody in here ain't a real man." And then, before Patrick and SpongeBob could sneak out of the bar, the bar manager catches them and says, "Hey, we're on a baby hunt. And don't think we don't know how to weed them out. Now everybody line up." The bar manager instructs the DJ to play the Goofy Goober theme song, and SpongeBob and Patrick try to resist singing as we're watching the bar manager go down a huge line. One of the bar patrons coughs during the test, and then the manager says, "It was you! You're the baby!" And then he says, No, I only coughed, I swear!" And yes, he was also voiced by D. Bradley Baker. Yeah, D. Bradley Baker played 3 characters in this movie. So, the bar manager finally gets to SpongeBob and Patrick, and we see SpongeBob and Patrick trying to hold it in until a group of conjoined twins said, "Goofy, Goofy, Goober, yeah!" Oh, yes, and I forgot to mention they're also voiced by D. Bradley Baker, so technically it was 4 characters, because he also voices these conjoined twins. And then the bar manager's like, "Which one of you 2 babies was it?" And then they are both pointing fingers at each other, and then they both said, "We never even eaten that Goofy, Goofy, Goober, yeah!" And then the bar manager's like, well, looks like we have ourselves a double baby. And then a fight breaks out as most of the patrons begin roughing up the conjoined twins. SpongeBob and Patrick sneak out, but they manage to get their hands on the key and drive off with the paddy wagon. So we cut back to the next morning at Squidward's house, saying, too bad SpongeBob's not here to enjoy SpongeBob not being here. And Squidward begins pedaling down the street with his unique-looking bicycle. And then Squidward sees people wearing bucket helmets and then says, wait. And then asks one person, where did everyone get that horrid headwear? And then a lady tells Squidward that Plankton's giving them away with every Krabby Patty at the Chum Bucket. And then Squidward goes to the Chum Bucket to confront Plankton, telling Plankton that it was you all along. Actually telling Plankton that you may have fooled everyone in this town, but you can't fool me. And then he planned to report Plankton to King Neptune. But Plankton presses a button on Karen, activating the helmet brain control. And then Plankton instructs the bucket-headed citizens to seize Squidward by saying, seize him, slaves! And then Plankton begins laughing, saying, who can stop me now? Who? So we cut back to SpongeBob and Patrick again, driving down the road, the skull-covered road, with the paddy wagon. And the paddy wagon soon comes across an ice cream stand after Patrick says, babies don't belong out here in man's country. And then SpongeBob's like, we blew that bubble. Didn't that make us a double bubble blowing baby? And then, like I said, they stop at an ice cream stand run by an old lady. SpongeBob goes to purchase the ice cream, but when he tries to take it back to the paddy wagon, his hands get stuck. And he realizes that the lady's hand is stuck on the ice cream bowl, but then realizes that the ice cream stand was actually a fake. And then a giant mouth begins opening up, and SpongeBob sees that it was a giant monster, and not just any monster, a ginormous frogfish. SpongeBob manages to free himself, and Patrick manages to catch SpongeBob in the paddy wagon, and then a huge chase begins. The paddy wagon... And then, of course, we transition to Dennis at the Thug Tug as he blows a bubble. And then he is confronted by the bar manager and the patrons. Of course, Dennis knocks the bar manager's socks off and then sends him down into the Thug Tug, and the tug ship began to sink down off of this cliff, even further and further after the bar manager crashed. And the patrons look on, and then Dennis drives off on his motorcycle. Then we cut back to SpongeBob and Patrick's chase with the frogfish, as the frogfish is gaining closer and closer. And then the old lady, who was part of the frogfish's tongue, said, "Come on, dearies, have some ice cream." And then SpongeBob and Patrick scream. Then she says, "I'll let you pet Mr. Whiskers." And then she shows this creepy-looking cat that comes out of the frogfish's mouth, which is also part of the tongue. And then SpongeBob says, "Jump for it, Patrick!" And then they bail out of the paddy wagon, with the frogfish eating the paddy wagon, and then a bigger monster eating the frogfish. They come across a trench that is infested with monsters. And SpongeBob's like, "There's the road. On the other side of this deep, dark monster-infested trench. And so, yeah, they come across the monster-infested trench. And then, Mindy ends up showing up after telling them that things have changed when you left Bikini Bottom, or shall I say Planktopolis, as she shows what's going on back home through a magic mirror. Then, Mindy, using her mermaid magic, transforms SpongeBob and Patrick into men. And they make it across the trench after jumping down into the trench and begin singing Now That We're Men. And I love this song sequence, because this shows SpongeBob and Patrick's confidence get boosted after Mindy just put 2 pieces of kelp on their face and make them think they are men. So, they finally reach the other end of the trench and are close to Shell City. And then they are confronted by Dennis, who then tells them that Plankton hired me to step on you, because he wanted to make sure that you never found out that he stole the crown. And then he said, perhaps I said too much, and then prepares to step on SpongeBob and Patrick by using his big spiky boot. But then a ginormous bigger boot steps all over Dennis, and they are come across a diver, which is called the Cyclops. The diver chases down SpongeBob and Patrick and captures SpongeBob and Patrick. SpongeBob